All right, y'all. I am Marwan Cameron, and this is the Conduit. Man, do we have a show for you tonight? As you can see from the title, if you're tuning in, this is the Obiwan Kenobi show. All right. So episode 1 and 2 review, but I'm not going to do this thing by myself. I can't. I don't know that much about it. I'm a fan, but I don't go that deep in it. So I had to bring on some experts to talk about this thing. And I'm going to introduce my first two right off the bat. All right, we got Matt Garrett and Doug Ferguson. How y'all doing today?
What's up, Marwan?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
All right, I like it. Happy to be here. You know what? Like I'm happy to be here. This is supposed to be a fun time.
Isn't that how they guests act on like these interview shows?
Yeah,
very professional.
It was the NPR voice. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, and then of course we have Rob Dent. How you doing today, Rob?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Marwan. And in deference to what you said, thanks, and back to you.
All right, so this is going to be a long night. We're going to have lots of jokes, apparently. So, but yeah, so this is the Obiwan Kenobi Disney Plus series. I think all of us were looking forward to this series coming out. There was just Star Wars Day just happened, isn't that true? This last weekend. So a lot more, information has been released on things that they're going to be doing, video games. TV projects. They didn't really mention much about the movies. I know Taika Waititi is going to be next up for the next movie, but outside of that, not a lot, going on there as far as information. So that was a little disappointing. But man, we are getting really blessed. This is a good age to live in, from seeing the comics and the old movies, and then building on that, and now TV and having the money for the special effects and everything else. So it looks fantastic. So we're going to geek out, for a little bit with you. So let's just start right at the beginning. And I want to lead it off, and then I'm just going to kind of pass it to you guys to jump in there. For me, I don't know much about Star Wars as much as the three of you do. However, I really enjoyed the recap, that 60-second recap of movies 1 through 6, and just kind of giving the history of what was happening to the point to find Obi-Wan where he is. So, Matt, Doug, what do you think about that?
Gave me chills. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to see those movies smashed up like that, almost like you might see something similar before you watch Game of Thrones. It really captured the drama and the way they spliced it, and the music, even though it wasn't John Williams, it felt very touching and powerful, I thought.
Yeah, I think it. I love the stories coming out of how much the prequels are getting some respect and some love after years of. I'm a prequel defender, and I'm a prequel. And maybe we can do another show on the prequel. Was there problems? Yes, but
problems.
But I do think it's good to see.
Wow, you're underselling it, Matt.
What's that?
Look, Force Awakens was good. Force Awakens was good. That's about where I'm ending with it. Go ahead, Rob. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say the 60 seconds in the beginning did something that I never thought it would do. It made me care more about the prequels than I ever have. Okay. Yeah. I mean, in feeding into the story, and I've seen all of them. I mean, I look, they said Phantom Menace, and I'm like, I waited 15 years for this. Yeah, I'm in the theater like 5 times to see it.
Yeah.
But to show Obi-Wan's story and to see it, to recap it, it set you up right for the series, I felt.
100%.
Last thing I'll say about that is I think when the first movie was released was right toward the end of the midnight releases, where you can go what was that, Thursday night to the movies at 11 o'clock. Do you guys remember that? Did you do any of those things? Stand in line?
We did. Yeah. Doug was actually there. It was for Revenge of the Sith. It was my 16th birthday, and my family, we got my grandparents' motorhome, and we camped out for I think almost 2 days. We camped out in front of the theater in Ontario, California, and it was fantastic to be there with the Star Wars tribe. And I think now a lot more seats are reserved, so I don't know if that's happening as much, but that was it was almost like a Star Wars festival. Rob, I don't know if you have that experience, but it was a precious memory to be with the club out in front of the movie theater.
I would tell you that with Empire Strikes Back, it was like that. My mom took us to see it, and we went to see it at the first show of the day it came out, because there wasn't a midnight release at that time.
Yeah.
And then Return of the Jedi, we stood in line for tickets for 5 hours to go see Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And to speak to it, my son was 5 years old, and the first movie that he sat through in the theater, I literally called up my boss and took the day off work and took him to see Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and he's a Star Wars fan too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've had those experiences, and there's nothing like being there on opening night at those theaters. I mean, because everybody and their brother shows up, and I'm a stormtrooper, or I'm a Jedi, or I mean, all of it. So it's great.
Well, good. So this thing basically is 10 years into the at the end of the fight with Anakin and Obi-Wan. So to see him in the cave, and just all these random thoughts kind of go through my head, like the sand shark and cutting up the meat. I'm wondering, like, all right, so how is this sand shark in here? And Rob was trying to explain it to me this morning. So tell the folks about the sand ocean or whatever.
Well, I mean, it's the Dune Sea, so I mean, it's a giant desert, but it's also shifting sands, and I found it impressive that Obi-Wan goes and finds his lightsaber and stuff in the middle of that desert. I mean,
hey, hold on, we're not even there yet. Let's talk about.
I gave an answer.
Let's try to go in chronological order of how events take place.
Okay.
I just want you to talk about the sand sharks.
Well, the sand shark itself, I mean, it's a creature that exists out there. As for their skin and stuff, I couldn't tell you about it. And the largest I've seen of it, I mean, was what we saw in the series. So, but
Matt, any history on that from?
Did you confirm it was a sand shark? Because for a second, I thought it might be a Purgle, the hyperspace whale, like that crashed into Tatooine. But I didn't confirm that. I just know because it did look more shark-like than whale-like than what we've seen in the Purgle. Yeah. And you'll remember play a prominent role in Star Wars Rebels, and they look like giant space whales with tentacles.
Yeah,
they're trippy as all get out.
They could be. I mean, I guess it's more open to interpretation than anything.
My thought was maybe this is like a crate dragon, right? I just thought large creature on Tatooine.
Yeah,
that's where my mind went.
Yeah.
Other than that, I loved seeing them chop up that little meat. Looked good. Yeah,
it wasn't very sanitary. And then they just left the block and called it. Like, not going to cover that up. It's just all,
right.
All good,
next time, work on the same block of meat.
Yeah. The sand is a little seasoning that's blowing on it, so I guess it's all good.
Maybe serve it.
There's not much Empire regulation on Tatooine. They don't. There's not a Tatooine OSHA out there dictating how they their meat safety.
Into that.
What's that, Rob?
I said the Huts aren't getting into that.
Yeah,
the OSHA part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
so, I found it interesting that that's where we find Obi-Wan in the beginning of it. Yeah. That here I am. I'm just a guy. I'm here working like anybody else. So that I found that interesting because I mean, here he is. He was one of the greatest generals during the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
and now he's just blending into the background like I'm a nobody. You know, I work day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when the sorry, Moen.
Go ahead, Doug.
And yeah, that stark difference of seeing him be this master Jedi and a general, and then here he is cutting meat. And when the boss is like giving him a hard time when he's leaving for his shift, it's like he has no idea who he's talking to. Like Obi-Wan could just go wild or like use a Jedi mind trick on him or something, but he's just he's so lowly. And
how surprised he didn't, when the boss is giving a hard time, it's because the boss took he only gave half pay to the worker in front of. So, and Obi is one of the more principled characters, right? Kind of the emblem, the poster boy of the Jedi code. You know, even though we did find he had in the Clone Wars, you know, with Satine, he had his own kind of dalliance with a love interest, but I think he, for the most part, he chose the code, and then to see him just abandon the code, right? So blatantly, you know, in an attempt to cover up it's very sad. It's kind of hard to watch of how they really show him beat up in these first episodes. And I think it's a strong effect. I think Doug and I liked the first episode better than the second. I think is because some of those character moments were so stark, and they did a really good job of portraying how beat up and traumatized Obi-Wan is.
Well, and you know, and at the same time, with you know his Padawan turning on him and he thinks he's dead, right?
Yeah.
But you know, having to go into hiding, but watch over Luke, and you know, later on we'll talk about you know what was said to him in that regard. But it's got to be in his mind, like, man, I got it wrong this time, but I've got to do this thing all over again. You know, is he actually the chosen one? You know, how's that going to work out? So he's still, you know, dedicated. I wanted to touch on just really quick. If I had a little nitpick in the very beginning, you know, I love the scene where Order 66 is being executed by the Emperor, but I didn't like the fact that it only took like 2 stormtroopers to take out, you know, Jedi. I mean, could we do a little bit more there? I mean, these are Jedi, you know, in the temple. Come on, you know. Thoughts on that?
It is interesting. Rob, I'm curious your thoughts, and Doug, yours as well. There's a huge variation in the different canon projects of how powerful are Jedi, right? You know, and we do see in Revenge of the Sith, I think you see some of the Jedi being taken down by, you know, just as little as 10 stormtroopers, right? But you also see them taking on hundreds of battle droids, and even in Clone Wars too, you know, some of the battles they're leading at the front, it looks like they can block, you know, hundreds, you know, of blaster bolts. So and maybe I know there is a differentiation of power, right? So some of the Jedi at the temple might not be on the front lines because, you know, I think there's different specializations, right? There's healers, there's teachers, and some of those might not be Jedi that are practiced, you know, in swordsmanship or combat as much as their combat counterparts. So I think that might describe some of it, but it is an interesting question. And in some of the non-canon projects, I remember the Clone Wars, not 3D animation, but just regular animation, which is not canon, but it's a very awesome Star Wars project. There, the Jedis are like Marvel superheroes. You know, there's in that project, Mace Windu is taking on a whole army, like maybe a million battle droids at once, right? And he's taking them on, right? So and that's, I think they've grounded the Jedi a lot more in the canon now. It's, you know, they're powerful, but they're not, you know, all powerful. But I don't know, Rob and Doug, I'm curious kind of your thoughts on the Jedi power, because I think that's a hot debate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my quick take on this is, you know, the clones, you know, and the Jedi had a pretty special relationship going through war together. I think there's a lot of trust. So I might attribute maybe were caught off guard, just the shock of here are your allies and, you know, turning on you so suddenly. So maybe the surprise attack played some factor.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, one, there is variations in power, like you were saying, Matt. I mean, you've got healers, you've got teachers, even in the guys that are out there fighting on the front line. There's variations in power. And I would also, like Doug was saying, I mean, if you look how Order 66 was executed, I mean, look how many Jedi went down because they were caught off guard. I mean, even you see it all the way through, and I mean, the Clone Wars and the animated one, even Ahsoka was almost caught off guard by Rex because Rex was so close to her.
Yeah.
And Rex actually fought against it, and we know Ahsoka has power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So that that's I'm learning listening to the three of you talk. So for me, I look at Yoda and Mace and some of the other ones. Yeah, they're at a different power level. But I'm thinking, if you're a Jedi, you're still pretty powerful to be a Jedi. You should be able to handle more than 2 stormtroopers. So I get it. That's just a nitpick, but it was a good scene to see.
Sure.
And then we get the Inquisitors that kind of land. What was your first thoughts on that? Because they were badass to me.
My initial take on hearing the Grand Inquisitor and the way he talks in the bar really reminded me of a Tarantino movie, in particular Inglourious Bastards and Hans Lambda, the SS soldier, kind of, being so eloquent and kind of building that tension. And so that, it was really a very dramatic moment, had me on the edge of my seat. And I love Reva. I think she's really a strong presence too. I'm excited to see where she goes.
Okay, why do you love Reva?
I don't want to get to the later on when she confronts Owen and she chops off that villager's hand. It was just like, whew. I like to see the Empire act as brutal as they are. I think it sets them up as really, they're the power. They can do these types of things in the galaxy at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob, your thoughts on the Inquisitors?
I think that the live action version of the Inquisitors are great. I enjoyed seeing them from the minute they showed up. And I think that Doug was accurate. That reminds me of Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards. Really does. I mean, just so eloquent and, so precise. Yeah. And as for chopping off the hand, yeah, I'm on board. Yeah. I want as brutal as you can get. If you're the Empire right now, you're at the height of your power. There ain't nobody in your way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that bar scene too, I think illustrates, Deborah Chow. I think she really did a good job of directing that, and probably why the first episode I think was a better just piece of film and television, because there's so much happening there, right? So yeah, you have kind of the Christoph Waltz tension, right, of narrating what's actually like kind of happening, right, and then actually just they're so confident in their plan, right, that the Inquisitor can just tell, right, it's an itch that they have to scratch, right, and the tension slowly building. It's so menacing. But then right in the middle of that, then Reva steps in, which is what her character, right? She's impulsive. She can't control herself, right? And then you also see the tension between the Inquisitors, right? Which later sets up the drama going forward. And then right there, the Jedi stops the knife, right? From before it actually impales the barkeep who's been sheltering. And then you see that. So there's so much happening in that scene and so much tension. And you see the Jedi, then kind of run away, which then leads to, I think, even a more, just a brutal scene where that Jedi goes and implores Obi-Wan to help, and Obi-Wan says no in order to not draw attention. And Obi-Wan knows he's basically saying that's a death sentence because the Inquisitors are after him, and that, I think, the power of when you see the dead Jedi hanging later was, I think, just really well done to show how hard times are and how changed Obi-Wan is, right? Obi-Wan is always the Jedi that would never sacrifice, right? They never trade lives, I mean, that's who Obi-Wan is. And then to see him so callously, and I think we can talk about the motivations, and that's what I think there's a lot going on with Obi-Wan's character right now. But I thought these early scenes really quickly set up how dire where Obi-Wan's at, the dynamic of the Inquisitors and the dark side and the new power structure, really, really effectively, really quickly.
You know, what's interesting about that is it's been 10 years. He's having the nightmares. He's definitely traumatized, right? He's got post-traumatic stress disorder. But at the same time, he does see the macro picture, right? He believes in his mission. And so he's going to watch over this boy until he comes of age, and then he's going to train him. So, you know, while he is down, he's still on mission. So there's something to be said about that, to say, you know what, I've got to swallow this, and I've got to watch these atrocities happen in front of me and suppress the force, right? And not lash out in that way. And you're right, you know, the younger Jedi does remind me of an Obi-Wan of old, a younger one, or even an Anakin. You know, they wouldn't stand by for that, and they would absolutely jump into the fray. So just having the Inquisitors come down, and the Grand Inquisitor saying, you know, basically the Jedi hunt themselves, because I mean, they're do-gooders, and they're going to do good, and they're going to foil themselves ultimately. I thought was definitely appropriate. And I think at the same time with Reva, you know, the dark side kind of destroys itself, and maybe that is setting it up. She's so hell bent on getting Obi-Wan, and I don't know why that is yet. So we'll have to get into that. That ultimately, I think she probably ends up destroying herself just because she's so overzealous and committed to you know, I don't give a damn what the Grand Inquisitor has to say or anyone else. I'm doing it my way. So it's pretty interesting. Rob?
I would say, well, like Obi-Wan, to speak to what you were saying, where he's staying on mission, I think the mission's all he has. He has no choice but to stay on mission. Okay? At this point, that's all he's got to hang on to, because he's everything else. I mean, he's lost his best friend, his brother, and he effectively, in his own mind, had to kill his brother because you know, he does not. You know, Anakin's dead, so you know, and he is suffering the post-traumatic stress syndrome with the nightmares and all that. But he's broken, and all he does have left is watching Luke. So if I can do this one thing and do this one thing right, then maybe, just maybe, I can be redeemed for all the other things. You know?
Yeah.
So they kind of set that up. You know, they introduce the Inquisitors. They come to town, and then correct me if I'm correct. A lot has happened since I've watched the episode. Did we cut to Princess Leia at that point in time? Was there a switch in episode 1?
It does cut to Leia and on Alderaan, in the first episode. Yep.
So did I miss anything before we kind of jump to that?
No.
I mean, there's some great banter with Obi-Wan in the Jawa. I thought that was love those guys.
Hey, you know, if you're gonna steal my stuff, can you at least, you know, clean it up before you try to sell it back to me?
That was nice.
Yeah, that was a great touch. I also like that Obi-Wan, I think his home depicted in A New Hope is different, right? And so Obi-Wan here is actually underground, and I think that's somewhat symbolic. One, that the Jedi are underground, right? He's literally in a cave, but he's in this dark place. And I think when we visit him in later, like in when Rebels visits him, that's quite some time later when he has his final duel with Maul, and then in New Hope he's above ground. I wonder if there's some kind of sly symbolism of him actually, he's coming to peace, you know, with where he's at. And even in some of that final battle with Maul, he taunts Maul and says, "Look what I've overcome." And I think this is what he's overcoming more than what we originally thought, that of his, you know, actually dealing with the fallout and the trauma. And he's had a lot of trauma, right? Think about having to actually go kill your apprentice for the sake of the galaxy. I mean, I can't, your brother, right? I mean, that's what it's so tragic. And how could you not have a ton of trauma? And so I think that's a very interesting tack. I know some people are a little upset, just like when, you know, we saw Luke dealing with the same thing in Last Jedi, but I think it is very appropriate for these characters to have to deal with the incredible fallout of the horrific circumstances which they dealt with in earlier films. So I think it's actually a much more realistic and human portrayal of Obi than rather that, you know, he's back to General Kenobi just like that and is kicking butt, right, and taking names.
Well, and he could have just abandoned the quest altogether, right? He didn't have to look over Luke. He could have said, you know what? You guys told me this was the chosen one. He wasn't, and look what I had to do. You know, I'm done. And I'll bury my sabers and just live out my life in exile or whatever, right? And just try to exist. But he didn't do that. So, he's a pretty deep character. I do like. I love being able to pull away from the movies where you only have 2.5 hours and really kind of dig in to the characters and really develop there. So that's great for a fan that doesn't have the background that the three of you have, for sure. So we cut to Leia, and I thought it was really interesting. For me, this is really kind of a story of a father and a son with Darth Vader, and then and Luke, and then it kind of continues on. And so I was kind of surprised that they focused on Leia right in episode 1. I figured there might be more character development on 10-year-old Luke, and not saying that's not going to come, but they just did that right off the bat. So what were your thoughts on that kind of switch?
I was surprised too. I hadn't heard. I don't know, Rob, if you saw any leaks, but that was a utter surprise. I hadn't seen any leaks that Leia was even going to be a part of this. I think that's pretty. Lucasfilm has shown they're willing to go there, right? With CGI young Luke and bringing live action Ahsoka, and so they've been shown to go there, but. It's a big risk dealing with young Leia, but overall, I think it largely went well. But I was very, very surprised, and it's very touching to see Bail Organa. I forget the actor's name that plays Bail Organa, but I think does such a good job, and has really plays Bail Organa to a T, and to see these tender moments and to actually see Alderaan, right? Because part of one of the critiques of the New Hope is when the Death Star blows up Alderaan. We've never seen it, right? You don't really care about it. It's kind of like in Force Awakens when they blow up the Hosnian system, right? It's the kind of same thing. It's like, I get why, but but here you're actually now a scene. And now I feel like when you watch New Hope, you'll actually have a reference point for what's being blown up and these kind of peaceful people and a lot of tender moments with Leia. And of course, I know Doug and I have one scene which really was a little eye rolly, but we can get to that in a second.
The only one in regards to Leia? Oh my God. Go ahead, Doug, jump in there. And that's Jimmy Smits, who played Bail Organa.
Thank you.
Jimmy. Yeah, Jimmy did great.
Yeah.
I wish he was my dad. He seems like a really cool guy. But wow. I thought the girl who played Leia was actually really cute and a good actress. Like I think it kind of captured. Star Wars is for kids.
Yeah,
Doug.
I hate to tell myself that because I want to see more hands chopped off. But this is so they had to bring in a kid element, and it sets up for an interesting Taken movie in the Star Wars galaxy.
Wow.
And that's how I viewed it. And I think that's kind of a fun plot device. I'm happy to see childhood Leia.
Well, and we thought, I think it was an interesting story choice. And I think it was maybe the only, now that I'm thinking about it, because what would prompt Obi-Wan, right? Diehard Obi-Wan to leave Luke, right? The only thing that would probably do that is Leia being, right? What other crisis in the galaxy would prompt that to happen? And I think that's why it was a smart story choice of having Leia get taken, and Liam Neeson, right? He's part of the he's part of the Star Wars universe. So I know we're waiting for him to have the call with the people that were taken, or the kidnappers.
Well, then you're gonna have to have 50 cutscenes when he jumps a fence because he's 1,000 years old. Please no.
A couple shin kicks.
Shin kicks. What I didn't like about Leia is I just hate the smart ass kids. I think they could have had her lines be a little bit better. I don't know. Do you think she was using the Force and she can intuitively read what people were thinking? Do you think that's what it was? Because I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, she's 10, even if she's a savant, like this is kind of weird. Am I off base on that?
I think that's what they were implying, like when she reads her cousin, right, and kind of knows exactly what his emotion. I mean, I think it's a nod. She is a Force user, but she's really used the Force kind of politically, emotionally, and kind of on the intelligence side rather than actually pushing objects around and making people float. And so I think that's a nod to that. I understand she is a little. She's kind of a little smart aleck, but that's to some extent, I think that's Leia, right? Leia's a little sarcastic, right? She doesn't need to be rescued. She's a strong feminist icon. I think that's the essence of what they were trying. I have a pretty high degree for some stilted dialogue with Star Wars, right? Like there's always some eye rolly lines with Star Wars. It's kind of just part of the whole genre, like you don't always nail it. So my threshold for kind of not the greatest dialogue in Star Wars is pretty high. So I give a lot of leeway, but I understand your point for sure.
Does it bother any of you that Star Wars is so repetitive in kind of how they do things? So you got Padme that was using a body double. She uses a body double. There's just a lot of kind of repetition throughout the stories. Does that get old? Do you feel like, hey, come with something new that doesn't matter? Does it fill you with nostalgia and connect you? What's your thoughts on
that? It doesn't really bother me all that much with the repetitive stuff. I mean, some of it does. I mean, you come back to watch A New Hope, watch Force Awakens. Well, you pretty much watched the same movie.
Yeah.
Well, they changed a couple locations, but it's the exact same story.
Yeah.
But did I watch it? Yeah, I watched it, and I enjoyed it. So
I agree with you, Rob, and I think it's. And I actually didn't catch the body double and that being like a subtle hint to Padme and her body double. That's kind of, I like those subtle repetitive things. That's kind of cool. But when it's the major plot points, like Force Awakens, the more I watch that, the more I get a little more jaded. And I mean, the sequel movies, it's a whole nother 5 hours of discussion. So
yeah.
But I didn't mind it so far in Obi-Wan. Yeah.
I just don't understand how there's no Capitol security outside. There's no perimeter outside the palace, right? Like anyone can just walk around out there.
Aren't they pacifists? Like
I guess they're pacifists.
People. Yeah.
Very trusting.
Yeah. See where that got there.
I thought the set pieces were really well done. Looks like they spent some really good money on setting this thing up. So it was definitely very immersive. So I can appreciate that. And the escapism for me, visiting new places or going deeper into new places. Some shows you can kind of see, it's kind of low budget or they saved it just for the big battles. But I felt like I was there. It looked really good to me. How did you guys feel? Were you disappointed at all, or you feel like it's up to snuff? You want more?
With the Star Wars shows, I mean, and because Marwan, we've watched a lot of these streaming shows, and for Star Wars, it felt to me like I was watching a movie that they spent the money. I mean, it's kind of like watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I thought that they spent the money there too. Even most of Halo, I felt they spent the money on the things that needed to be so that they were all immersive. So yeah, I think Star Wars has done a wonderful job with it so far. And I've thought that even with The Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett. So,
I take it as big fans, you watched all of those series, right, Matt and Doug?
Yes. Yeah. I love, Mando is great. Boba Fett's like one of my favorite characters. So I had really high expectations for that. And I left feeling like it was just kind of so overall, but some individual episodes and moments were awesome. And
like the Mandalorian, Din Djarin showing up, that made that series.
It really lifted it. Yeah, when he showed up, it turned it around. But I think the vibe I'm getting from Obi-Wan is it feels overall more cinematic.
Mhm.
So I think, I don't know if it just feels more coherent right now, whereas Book of Boba Fett maybe jumping back and forth in time was a little dizzying, and it wasn't quite clear Boba Fett's motives, and where this is very clear. Obi-Wan's on a mission, and maybe Deborah Chow's to thank for that. I hope that she maybe having one person lead this series would be pretty cool. So
we'll continue on that way. Yeah, Boba Fett, from how I understood him to be, was really contradictory to how he was portrayed in the Disney Plus series, right? He didn't want to fight and was trying to find other ways, and just seems like he was making really stupid decisions. And like, you're a bounty hunter, man. Like, you're the baddest in the galaxy. Like, what is he doing? What is he thinking? So I didn't really care for that. And then, seeing some of the other folks come together for the battle, I kind of wish that would have been 2 episodes instead of just one, because they could have done so much. And let's not even get into the mopeds in Star Wars.
Woo! That was a dark day for me. Yeah.
When
what the hell?
The Rev's favorite part, man.
Oh, why would you? I know you shouldn't bring the Power Rangers into Star Wars, and it really just did not fit the vibe, the ethic. It was very, very difficult,
and it made it seem very cheap too.
Yeah.
It made it seem like I was watching a Saturday afternoon, TV show like Xena or Hercules or something like that. And
there you go.
Yeah. I don't know how far we want to stray into Boba Fett. It's a touchy subject. I think we all have feelings. But I'll loop back in as what I think is I think they've done a really good job. I still think the movies are a little bit higher, but not much. I think I loved really seeing Alderaan in the cinematic shots, and I think they found a way with some of the newer technology to make these shows really close to cinematic quality and to give them that sense of scale and grandeur that we expect from Star Wars. So I'm really happy with that. Some of the sweeping shots of Alderaan with the snow-capped mountains in the background and flying, just those small tracking shots, like they're not much, but they show them flying around the city. Like that stuff I think matters a lot in Star Wars and is really important for setting the stage of these environments. And
I'm kind of curious what you think, Marwan, about the Grand Inquisitor, because having watched the animated series and seeing that character there with a much thinner, alien type head, and then seeing him here, it is a little distracting for me. But does that bother you at all, or what were your thoughts?
I'm able to, I find myself to be a pretty logical person. But when it comes to fantasy and sci-fi, I can suspend all of that. And it's like, well, believable to me. I'm going for the ride. I get that there's limits on what you can do. And some things that happen in the comics or in animation isn't going to translate to live action. So, there's people that are really angry about Gore the God Butcher for not having his long kind of tail things and having a nose. Those things don't bother me. It's close enough that it's like I get who it is. I just want to see them in action doing their work, right? I mean, it's a very unique saber that he has. I want to see him do more than just spin it like a bladeless Dyson. I want to see him really get in there and fight. That's what's important to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Rob, you feel the same way, or are you more this needs to be accurate?
There was a time I would have said this needs to be accurate. But over time, with watching all the different things I've learned to adapt, because if I want to see a good story, sometimes you've got to be able to accept things.
Yeah.
And
I do, and this is where I think the Lucasfilm, right? I think since they've taken over and the prequels got hammered for an over-reliance on CGI, I almost think in some ways the pendulum swung too far, and now there's an over-reliance in some respects for characters because Ahsoka, the Twi'lek head tails, for lack of a better word, right? Like for her age, they're supposed to be a lot longer, right? And they had to shorten them up. And then and I get it, they're doing it because it's not practical right, for Rosario Dawson to be, acting with, pigtails that are right down to her feet. So I get it from a practical standpoint, and I'm willing to forgive some stuff, but that's where I wonder if, like, well, maybe there's a CG solution, right? Like, I know you don't want to do that with some of the, right, you're trying to really introduce as much practical as you can, but I wonder if there might be a CG. And same with the Grand Inquisitor, I wonder if there might have been a CG solution that might have not looked as great, but would have had that continuity, right? So I don't know. Overall, I'm okay with it, but I do. It is a little weird that, right, from Rebels, right, and seeing basically her pigtails are shrinking from when we last saw her in Rebels, and I don't know, like a Benjamin Button thing, I guess.
Well, you know what? It's Rosario Dawson. So outside of that, I mean, she's like perfect. So I'll take it.
No,
That's
she did.
True.
She's acted Ahsoka brilliantly. So I definitely compliment her, and I think she's done well with the. Well, I really hope. On a side note, I really hope that we get to see Ahsoka in Obi-Wan, because Ahsoka's running around. So I would love an Obi-Wan Ahsoka reunion in live action, and I'd really love if they. Because I know a lot of people are upset that the Rebels actress, Ashley, I think Eckstein, is the voice actor that plays Ahsoka. And I think it'd be a fun nod. Some people were upset that she didn't get cast in the role, because she actually is a live action actress as well. But they went Rosario Dawson. And I understand Rosario Dawson's amazing, but I feel like it'd be a nice nod for Ashley Eckstein to actually be a younger Ahsoka Tano in live action. And that would be a fun nod to her and the work she's done bringing that, incredibly complex and amazing character to life from the studio. So that's what I'm hoping. Something says I don't know if we'll get it, but I have hopes for something like that to happen.
So what are you hoping for? Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, Ahsoka and Vader, Vader and Obi-Wan, like episode 6?
It wouldn't make sense for Ahsoka and Vader because they have a big reunion in Rebels, but I think just Obi-Wan and Ahsoka to have a moment where, even if it's just a short conversation or just run into just for a little bit, even just one scene, that maybe Ahsoka helps them out or they just have a small connection point, right? I think that would be a real touching place to be. What do you think?
Well, Mike, I think that'd be a cool cameo, but I would love to see Mace Windu in this.
What?
He lost his hands, but then he just flew out a window. I mean, Boba Fett was eaten by a Sarlacc pit and he survived, so he could still be out there.
This is Star Wars. Unless you see the dead body on screen burned, really, it probably should be burned to confirm. That's the only way we know they're actually.
We watched him die, and he came back.
Yeah, Darth Maul.
Yeah. You can survive getting chopped in half. Maul did it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the lightsaber instantly cauterizes the wound. So that is the downfall of that weapon, is that you don't really bleed out, right? It instantly gets cauterized and off you go.
So to be clear, Mace Windu, purple lightsaber, definitely my favorite. But what do they do with him from a story standpoint from now to the end of, the Nine-G? Is that even a word? Nine-G?
Yeah.
What would his story be that would be fitting for Mace?
For me, I think, Mace is one of the Jedis that had such a high seat on the Jedi Council.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was a great warrior, and perhaps he kind of played into Palpatine's hands too much. So I think he would have a lot of shame for going along with the war and giving so much power to Palpatine. So I could see him also needing some, a forgiveness arc, or like something where he, works through his shame, and maybe he sacrifices himself in the process, or I don't know. That I think it'd be. I mean, I'd hate to see him die again, but we know
to kill him.
Not everybody can live, in a drama. I would love to see him again. I think he could still survive and still use the Force with no hands.
I think there's a few different. You could go the forgiveness arc. I think you could go the Darth Windu arc, where he actually, because of the failures of the Jedi, he actually turns to the dark side and has a revenge plot. Like, he's trying to take revenge on Vader and Palpatine and ends up failing. I think that could be an interesting way to go. It would be dark.
To duel Vader.
With using the dark side, right? So I don't know, but I think it would be interesting to bring another prequel character back. I don't know if it makes sense for him to pop up here, but maybe at some point with all these shows that they're doing.
Yeah, well, that's pretty interesting. And Mace uses both, right? Because he uses Shatterpoint and what is it, like both the light and the dark? Am I wrong on that?
His I think his lightsaber fighting style is it kind of like uses a lot of anger. I think, Rob, are you familiar with the lightsaber forms, or know what I'm trying to get to?
I know what you're trying to say, and he does rely on things that touch on the dark side with the anger and the pain, but not to the levels that would take him all the way there. So,
yeah.
All right, so let's jump back into the actual show because we've digressed and went into deeper into fantasy land. So Leia gets kidnapped, and the bounty hunters have her. We find out Reva is behind it. They end up leaving the planet, and Organa contacts Obi-Wan and says, "Hey, I need you to come get Leia," and he's like, "No, get someone else." And he's pleading with them, and it's like, "No, I'm not leaving." And it takes, Organa actually coming to the planet, which I didn't know who was in the cave. So I thought maybe he was going to have to use his force powers right then and there in the cave. So I was pretty surprised that it was Organa. What are your thoughts on Obi-Wan being so kind of dug in? Like, I'm not going to save the princess, even though I know that that's the twin of Luke.
I find, again, he's holding on to his one mission, the take care of Luke. And he, I would say, feels that he's not good enough. He is hiding being a Jedi, but at this point, why would I want to be the guy? I haven't done this in 10 years. I can't do it. You've called the wrong guy. Just let me stay here and do what I'm supposed to do. That's it.
And I kind of get I agree with that. I also get the sense that maybe he's using Luke as an excuse just to avoid being called back into a great mission. I think his self-confidence has taken a big blow, and the trust that he's had in himself. So I think he's scared, that he'll fail again.
That's pretty interesting that he's scared that he's going to fail again. But ultimately he leaves. He goes to find Leia and rescue her. And is this where you guys had your problem? Because you were saying that there was going to be an issue coming up. So, or is this just regular Leia, right? This is who she is. She's going to free herself, and she's going to get away, and she's not trusting. Although, why would you trust this guy that, is saying, "Hey, come with me. Your dad sent me." What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing that made us... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
The exact comment in my house was, "I'd have left her on the Death Star." Okay.
Wow.
Flat out. If you're like that when you were little, why would I even showed up to pick you up at the Death Star? You'd have just stayed there.
It was a little frustrating. The thing that made us cringe was actually earlier in the foot chase through the woods when Leia was trying to run away from the bounty hunters. And those bounty hunters really struggled with branches and trees. A branch! Like, they couldn't just duck, or they seemed to be running very slowly, and
But her skills were there, man. She was all over that woods.
Yeah, that's true. She did a cool slide. That was neat.
Oh yeah.
I think they're all dealing with back issues because no one could kneel down underneath a branch. Like, they all were foiled by a branch at mid height. So that's what we thought. I thought it would be much more effective just out of nowhere if she would have just gotten, taken, right? And I know what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to say Leia's kick ass and that's great. But I think that I think Leia already, through her character intellect, and she's already trying to break out. And I think they could have done that in a variety of ways.
She's 10.
She's 10. I know. She's 10. Yeah.
Very
so,
simple.
Star Wars Home Alone. Okay.
Yeah. It was Star Wars Home Alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just gonna say, but I know we got a little bit off track, but I know one of my favorite scenes of that first episode of kind of back to the original question of that of getting the plots in motion, Leia's taking an Obi, and then Obi's resisting the summons. And I think, Lucas always envisioned Star Wars as an epic, right? Following kind of that ancient storytelling device of the hero's journey. And I think Deborah's talked about following that thumbprint, and it's a pretty clear summons, right? The hero's being called, the hero's reluctant, right? But then ends up going, with a little bit of pushing. And that was just such a great scene to see Bail actually come, right? And then Obi reluctantly digs the lightsaber, and then that scene where you even see it of the ticket taker out in Tatooine was like, "Are you coming?" Right? And he kind of hesitates, and then he goes, and here we go. And then you see that flash of his lightsaber at his side. And I think that moment, even though there was really no battle, that was such an earn, because how much Obi had to put aside, given all everything we talked about early in this, to like, all right, I'm going to put that aside and go into the breach, one more time for Leia. And I'm going to leave Luke. I'm going to leave, the comfort of, the last thing he's holding on to. And I thought that was a great, just kind of like ending of the first episode is the summons. It was such an earned summons, kind of call to adventure. So I think that was my favorite part of the whole episode, is that little shot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I got a question for the three of you, and I don't know if this happens in any of the comics or anything else, but he hasn't used the Force in 10 years. So does he still have it all? Does he have to build back up to his peak strength? Kind of like, a boxer or a fighter, or, is he just right then, hey, I'm back and that's it? Do you know?
I'm Rob and Doug. I'm curious what you think. I've had my own thoughts on this, but I think this is another area.
I think, by watching the episode, and again, we're going to end up jumping a little bit, but the point where he uses the Force and he catches Leia.
Yeah.
When she between the buildings was falling, and it took everything. I mean, you can see the concentration on his face, and I think it's like exercising muscles, and it's something that he hasn't done in a long time, and he has to rebuild it, because I mean, he did catch her, but it took everything for him to catch a 10-year-old girl, where he could have moved mountains when he was, General Kenobi leading the Clone Wars, so.
Yeah, boy,
that's what I think.
That's a good point. And part of me really hopes that we get to see General Kenobi level Obi-Wan, do some really crazy stuff, jumping around. But then again, like kind of by the time of A New Hope, he's not doing much. I mean, the fighting is very like simple, and so maybe this might help explain why he's not at his peak. But I'd love to see him like just retrain through this series, and maybe by the end he's just so in tune with it again. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think my take is, yes, Marwan, is that a lot of the Jedi code and way is influenced on some of the Eastern religions, right? And that's a practice, right? It's a meditation, and so I think it is implied that you can lose that connection with the Force, right? Or you can lose some of the strength and power of it, because it does have to be something that's worked on, right? That you're actually in tune with, and that's the life force. And I think by hiding and he's not connected to it, right? That's further disconnecting him from really a lot of the goodness of life itself, and which I think is further kind of contributing to his deterioration. So, and I think that's why it is a powerful moment. But I agree. I think that's pretty much all he's got at that moment, right? When he prevents Leia. I think that's my take on it. Is he's disconnected so much, he's lost so much of that ability. And you even see that in the fighting style, right? Like he's like, oh, this is so hard. He's out of shape. Right, he's not who he used to be. He was serious. He still has some skills, but he's not, some of the Kenobi that we saw. And as much as Laura, I do want to see Kenobi back in his prime in live action. I just don't know if story-wise that's what we're going to get, right? Yeah. I think we're going to get, and that's part of his transition to this wiser Kenobi that we see later that's accepted his limitations, that's accepted how he's going to battle. And I think that's some of the explanation of why the lightsaber fighting is so stilted in A New Hope. Well, we know the real reason is because that's, they didn't have the prop guys and the choreography, but I think to make it exist. Yeah, but I think to make it all work is it's a different style of fighting, that he's accepted that it's a more kind of powerful, it's a different, talk about the different forms, it's a different form. And Rebels kind of talks about that a little bit too in the final duel with Maul, is that he actually changes. You see Obi initially line up in his old form, and then he switches to a newer form, and it's very symbolic of it's this new. He's accepting. No, I'm not going to fight the way I did previously, and so that's what I would expect to continue. Is that Obi is maybe not going to go to full on general mode, but he's going to accept his limit, and there's going to be he's going to fight a different way, right? And that's what you even see, right? He uses a lot of trickery. He uses the spice. Right, he doesn't actually confront. He doesn't use brute strength, at least compared to used to. Right, he's hiding, he's dodging, he's camouflage. It's stealth, it's spice, it's using the environment to his advantage, and I think that's what we might see more of. Although, there is going to be this battle between Vader and Obi-Wan, right? And I am so curious how that is going to go down, and if he's going, how that's going to look like. So I don't know. Well, we will. So there's a lot of good stuff coming.
Well, I'm hoping it's not just Vader. I hope he fights all the Inquisitors. I want to see an epic battle, every episode from here on out. But you guys bring up some really good points. So is it, he's spending these 10 years in the cave, and he's not connecting to the Force because he doesn't want to be found out, right? I mean, that was the whole thing, is people that are Force sensitive can sense other people that are using the Force. I'm correct in that, right? So if he's not, and he already has all this trauma, then he can't connect to the thing that is basically his life, then that would also really, illustrate very well where we find Obi-Wan 10 years later, not meditating and staying connected to the Force in that way. So that's a pretty powerful kind of observation there. And it makes me, look at Obi-Wan's situation a lot differently there. You were talking about, because we're kind of in episode 2 now, but going back to Reva and her brutality, and I guess everyone just cuts off hands in Star Wars. It's just a thing. Whether you have a sword or not, your hand's coming off, right? And it's like, I'm going to cut your hand off because every time you go to reach for something, you're going to think about us. So it's like, that's pretty crazy. But, Luke's, what is that? His uncle, is his name Owen?
Owen Large. Yeah.
He hates the Jedi. He hates Obi-Wan, but he doesn't give him up, at that point where she was going to kill him,
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about that? And I mean, I know he says, you would have got captured and you would have given him up and he would have killed him. But do you think Obi-Wan would have gave Luke up, or he would have died trying to defend it? I think he would have died. I don't think he would have done that. I think Owen was wrong there. You guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. And I think, Owen saw, I don't remember if Owen's in episode 1 when he sees Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan take Anakin away from Tatooine to join the Jedi, but he definitely knows Anakin could have lived his days out on Tatooine and helped out on the moisture farm or whatever, So I think he's protective of Luke. He sees that last time you took somebody that I knew, they died. So blame him there, and I maybe doesn't understand the whole big picture. But it's great to see Joel Edgerton back in this role. It's not a huge role, but he really acts it out of the park. Yeah, and the line where he says, like you trained.
Yeah.
Anakin or whatever. Powerful. It really stung.
The contempt in that line was so palpable. And I think it actually did a really good job to explain. It's kind of this weird thing that, as the New Hope gets going, you're like, oh, Obi-Wan was this great mentor or was this great hero, and Luke is so key. But then Luke doesn't, Obi-Wan's just in the hills the whole time, right? It's kind of this weird dynamic that, wait, wait, you're here going to train me? And you've just been in, like, why haven't you been training me this whole time? If this is like so important, like I've got 5 minutes of you training me. Right. And then like off you go. So it's kind of a confusing arc but I think you really see why. It's because Owen kept Obi-Wan at arm's length. Right. And you see that with the toy, which is a nod to Doug pointed this out. That toy is the same toy Luke is playing with in A New Hope, which is interesting as a model. Yes. That's one of the spaceships that he flies. But I think that helps explain also why that this narrative that Anakin is dead, right, is that's what Owen, I think, legitimately believes that. I don't know if Owen ever finds out that Anakin is not, that Anakin's Vader, right? And so that's why I think that's kind of helped. It kind of puts some narrative of why that is and why Obi-Wan is always kept at arm's length. And maybe we'll see that develop. But that's because Obi-Wan's clearly wanting to try to influence Luke in some way. And I think maybe Obi-Wan at the end of this is going to have to accept that I can't train Luke the way I thought, right? And I'm going to have to trust that his uncle and he's going to have, and the Force, right, is going to provide everything that Luke needs to do the job, which it actually does, right? Is to make the shot, he's been practicing that, firing at Womp Rats from his T-16.
Rob, what's your thoughts?
I think that Joel Edgerton, like you said, knocked it out of the park, and the contempt was literally palatable. I also think that I don't think that Owen ever learns the truth about Anakin because he dies too soon into A New Hope to have ever had a chance to learn the truth.
Yeah,
because when you meet him in A New Hope, it is no, man. And when Luke says something about, I think it's old Ben Kenobi out there. Yeah, he's just a hermit in the desert. He's a crazy old man.
Yeah.
So, he wants him to have nothing to do with him because, well, he, as far as I remember, he was not there in Phantom Menace when Anakin was taken away. Chose to go or what, but
yeah, because I think Owen is. Because I think, wasn't it Lars who bought?
Yeah, she ended up marrying his father after she was freed. So he wouldn't have been there anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think he knew because, the connection happened later after. Yeah.
Well, my thoughts are like, okay, the Earth is a big place, right? You can hide people in a lot of different places. So here's what you do. You take one twin and you give him to the Organas, but then you take Luke and bring him back to his family. You don't think the Emperor's like, hey, you know what? I know the potential destiny of these people. So let's go and just kill that whole line. Like everywhere in the galaxy, let's just go right back to square one. And we'll never look there.
Wasn't it assumed that the children died with Padme when Padme died?
Yeah, so I think the Emperor and Vader both believe that the kids died with Padme. And so that's why they're not looking, is because they believe that the line is dead.
Yeah, but nieces and nephews, like, you might want to just go wipe out everyone there. Just saying. Maybe I'm a little too thorough.
Just blow up the whole Tatooine. Make sure it's all
Empire. The Emperor's pretty evil, so I mean that might be what he does. But okay, so we're back in episode 2, and I know that there were a few people that didn't care for the fact that when Reva is chasing Obi-Wan and Leia, her parkour skills were on top notch. Did that irritate you at all, or were you okay with it? There seemed to be a few unnecessary flips and jumps in there. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I think part of it is it seemed a little unnecessary sometimes, and it seemed a little flashy for her character, right? Because she's just a kind of a brute force, right? I feel like she would just be. She's not one of the nimbler ones, so it was interesting. And I know what and it was a cool sequence, but I agree. It was a little over the top, but I don't know. What do you think, Bud?
I think there's a lot of things that are right in this Obi-Wan series. The things that are wrong, though, that they need to work on are chase scenes. Those were cool jumps she was doing, but I think didn't she still not end up making it after all?
Yes.
And then, And then also again, Obi-Wan's chasing Leia again through that market, and
Yeah.
she's going through the alien's legs. And it's like, oh, it's kind of funny, but it's like, can he just use the Force and just
Right.
But
but is he still trying to hide? Because if he uses the Force, they're gonna sense it. So that was the only thing I was thinking about that as on why he wasn't using the Force. But Rob, what are your thoughts on the flippy Bippy?
I'm gonna go back to like you were saying. Look, if she doesn't do all those unnecessary flips, maybe she catches up. I mean, the chase sequence, they had to extend it somehow. So they're like, well, let's just have her flip around and then explain.
Yeah. Well, and that was my big thing. Like, if you have an epic chase, I was just waiting for her to like show up to the rooftop when they're blasted. I thought she was going to be in the fray, right? Yeah. But then she doesn't get there. So it was a very anticlimactic, like she's late, right? It's like she gets, it was a chase scene really for nothing.
Showed up like a horror movie, but the one running just can't do it.
Yeah. It was
too miles.
That was a little anticlimactic.
Yeah. I will say this, Matt, I was watching, listening to some reviews and a lot of people were upset about that. But someone put on YouTube all the lightsaber fight scenes from all the movies.
Yeah.
Or 1 through 6, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really fantastic. And watching just the fight scenes, Luke was flipping around. Yoda was flipping around. So I was like, all right, they actually do that. So,
they do. Yeah.
I can accept it. It seemed a little excessive, but whatever.
I would make one argument. How's Yoda fighting anybody if he's not flipping around?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he's like knee high. So,
Yeah. I just hope we get the flipping when it comes to actual lightsaber fights.
Yeah.
I was really hoping for that at the end of episode 2, and for that not to be there was a little disappointing, but I hope they bring that. If she can flip jumping over crates and air ducts, I hope that they bring that to the fighting.
So, well, as we draw to a close, were you surprised that she took out the Grand Inquisitor?
Very. Yeah. I think I'm Rob. I really want to know where. Actually, Rob, go ahead. I want to know where you're at, and then I'll chime in.
Did I find it shocking that she ran him through with a lightsaber? Yes, I was like, oh no. But I mean, and is this Lucasfilm retconning what we know to be true in Rebels? Because the Grand Inquisitor's there, and we've seen other people survive lightsaber wounds, so he could very well be alive, but just out of commission.
Took it in the chest, right?
What was that?
He took it in the chest.
Maybe his species are in a different spot. Maybe his organs are in the bottom.
Yeah.
Alien race, so you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was really surprising because all the Rebels fans, Grand Inquisitor is a character who later in the timeline is a prominent feature and villain in season 1 of Rebels. So something is going on. Either, there's a clone, either he's not dead, or his brother takes over that has a little skinnier head. I don't know. We'll have to see what ends up happening. But I do think I'm actually curious that I was a little off-put. It was a little off-putting at first because like, wait, he's not actually dead. But so whatever ends up they do with that, I do think it was somewhat of a dynamic with kind of the dark side, right? The dark side eats itself. It's why the Sith have the rule of 2 and just how unruly the dark side is. So I actually thought that was a pretty good example, right, of why, the Sith and the problems of the dark side and how they, right, they're so, they backstab each other at the drop of a hat. And we haven't really seen that dynamic. We've only seen the Inquisitors in smaller numbers. So this is the most, I think 4 Inquisitors running around all at the same time is some of the most we've seen operating together. And I think this is probably how you would expect dark side Inquisitors to interact, right? Is there, it's not a fun place to be. And so I think, and also just shows Reva's intensity and drive, and maybe that Reva might be going rogue at this point, right? Is she just, I can't imagine Vader and Palpatine are being happy that, she just stabbed her boss. And so maybe she is going to have to go rogue for a little bit. And then maybe that will lead to some interesting dynamics with Obi without the rest of the Inquisitors, right? Because you have to think Obi in this state, maybe he could, maybe he couldn't. That would be tough for him to take on a few Inquisitors at once, right? So I think maybe that might be a clever story dynamic to get Reva just hunting Obi-Wan alone for a little bit. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the Grand Inquisitor goes into the bacta tank, and then it's just 2-on-1, and then we don't see him again. That would be horrible.
That would be.
Back out there.
Yeah.
That might happen.
I don't know. I think, Star Wars and Disney love redemption, and I think Reva's set up to be redeemed. I think her and somehow she's going to have to end up working with Obi-Wan to fight off maybe Darth Vader and the Inquisitors.
Really?
And that's my prediction right now.
All right, you heard it here first.
I like it.
And I think Obi-Wan's going to be able to save her or help her, be saved, like how when he wasn't able to save Anakin, or help him. Then my mind starts going, okay, now Reva's in this new Star Wars Disney canon, and maybe she helps establish like the new Jedi Order, with CGI Luke. And I start to spiral and go places, but that's my.
But your also theory is connected to the opening scene too.
Oh, I mean, what do we all think? Do we think Reva's a youngling in that opening scene in the Jedi Temple?
I do.
Rob?
Yeah.
Because they say she has a stench, right? So I think they're implying that she was actually a Padawan at one point, right? And then got. Okay. Doug, that's Doug's theory, but I think it totally makes sense. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some redemption. I doubt that she survives the series, but I do think it's very possible. Like Rob, like Asajj Ventress, right? She was, Tyrannus's Padawan, Count Dooku's Padawan, and then she was this intense dark side user, gets betrayed, surprise, surprise, by a dark side user, and then but then she's kind of in this nebulous space where she kind of sometimes has to team up, with I think she teams up with Ahsoka for a little bit, and so I could see Reva
the Order.
What's that?
Teaming up with her, and then Ahsoka had to deal with the Order after it, and it's why she turned her back and walked away.
Yep.
And now, even after they proved her safe or not guilty, I guess would be what you said, or you would say, she's still no. I'm done.
Yeah.
So, Rob, what's your prediction with Reva? Do you think? Do you agree with Doug, or do you think Vader ends up force choking her to death or going rogue? Like, what's your thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't say Vader would force choke her to death for going rogue, because how do the Sith climb the ladder? They assassinate the guy above them. So
that's true.
And aren't some of the Inquisitors were Jedi at some point or trained by Jedi at some point because they survived Order 66, and this is how I'm going to stay alive. Look, I'll use the dark side and do what I got to do.
Yeah.
I think the redemption is I'm going to go with Doug with it. That the redemption's there, that Obi-Wan brings her back to the light, because I mean, she's so angry and she wants to curry the favor of Vader by finding Obi-Wan, because but something's going to happen there where I think that's what'll happen.
Man, that's not a lot of time for redemption. We only have 4 episodes left.
You can set her up for her own series, those 4 episodes. Or
So we get to the end, and I don't understand how Force really works, but when Obi-Wan finds out that Vader is still alive, Vader seems to awaken up in his own tank. Is that why his eyes popped open? Do you think? Does that even make sense?
I think it would.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the sequel trilogy, there's Rey and Kylo Ren are sensing each other across the galaxy, and seeing that Obi-Wan and Anakin shared such a unique bond, it wouldn't surprise me, especially since he used the Force in that episode.
Yeah,
maybe that sent out a little ripple.
Yeah,
that he could sense.
Yeah, I agree. I do think the implication there is that they're, and I think that's what's probably really going to get this in motion, right? Because now Vader is like Obi-Wan's back on the playing field, right? And so I think things are going to start happening next episode, and then Obi knows that Anakin's alive too, and I think maybe there's going to be a temptation for Obi-Wan to go try to pull Vader from the dark side, because I think what and it makes sense, but it was never fully clear before this moment of when did Obi-Wan find out that Anakin was Vader, right? Because for all Obi-Wan knows, the job's done. He's burning in a lava pit, right? Like Obi-Wan is like, he's dead, right? He's dying there, and then, but, obviously the Emperor gets there very, very quickly shortly afterwards. And so I think that, to me, Rob, I'm curious your thoughts too, but that's the moment that Obi-Wan finds out that Vader is Anakin, and now this might set in, some attempt by Obi-Wan to either go, I think they're both going to be seeking each other at this point.
Yes, I think that the minute that she said Anakin's alive, and the shock that you see on Obi-Wan's face in the disbelief, I think that shock and everything else with the reconnection to the Force, that sends that huge ripple out that Vader senses.
Yeah.
And I think that that again, Obi-Wan's back on the playing field, and Vader has a reason to be directly involved, because this is someone that trained him. He knows his strengths, and knows that he's better than anything else he's got to send after him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a similar in Rebels when Anakin finds out that, or Vader finds out that Ahsoka is on the right. There's a similar, they're not like right. I think Vader's in his TIE fighter, and then Ahsoka's on the Rebel ship, but they sense each other's presence. So there is this established kind of canon that Jedi can sense each other. It's not like a GPS. I don't think they know exactly where they are, right? But they're just sensing that connection through the Force.
Well, it's a New Hope, and Obi-Wan on the Millennium Falcon and going, that's a feeling I haven't felt in a long time, or a person I haven't sensed.
Right. Yes. Ooh, good callback, Rob. That's awesome.
So the closer the proximity, does it get stronger?
I don't know if it works exactly like that. I would think so, but what's hard, but then there's also, you can hide your presence too, right? Because Yoda in Revenge of the Sith and even Attack of the Clones implies that the Jedi's vision is clouded, right? That they know the Sith are around, but and Palpatine works with the Jedi all the time, but
right next to him. Right
next to him. So it's not, I don't think clearly step for step, but I don't think there's like a math equation of how it works, because there's clearly, it's complicated, but they can hide, they can kind of have their vision clouded. But I think at some level there's the ability to connect. Maybe that's a more appropriate way to put it.
And I mean, there are multiple ways that they can hide. Like you were saying, you can mask yourself or whatever. But look, I mean, Yoda for 20 years lived on Dagobah next to a large source of the dark side, and that masked him.
Yeah,
that's pretty interesting. So we didn't talk about the kind of comic relief that happened in there. The guy who was faking like he was a Jedi.
Yeah.
Was he in something else?
Not in Star Wars.
We've seen him.
He's a famous actor. I forget his name.
Kumail Nanjiani.
Yeah, thank you.
He was in the Eternals more recently, but usually a comedian, I think, before that, stand up and
so he plays the Schindler.
I thought he was sending the mother and child to die until they explained it later. I was like, oh wow.
That's so true.
Yeah, I kind of like it. It was a little goofy, and it was a little like kind of like this is like a crime city, right? And you have such a goofy crime, but I actually do like that he's a kind of a complex, that he's trying to help people, but he's making a buck, right? He's a swindler, kind of like a Han Solo, like, right? He's still a swindler, but heart of gold type thing.
Man, but what a dangerous game when you've got the Empire hunting Jedi to pretend you're a Jedi to save people. Like, man, okay.
And then for him to say he was a Jedi to Reva.
Yeah.
And then if I was her, I would just, oh, you're a Jedi? And then just,
Yeah.
Yeah, why didn't she kill him?
Yeah. It was frustrating. Yeah.
I thought it was implied that he did die. Did he not die?
No, he didn't die.
No.
Yeah, no, he got out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So she must have knew that he wasn't a Force user.
I think she sensed it and just let him be, but still,
it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if he's going to come back at some point then.
My other question is here you are on a crime planet. The clone trooper that's sitting there, who do you think it was?
Tamura
Morrison.
Oh, yes, but who do you think it was? Which clone trooper?
Oh,
I don't know.
I think it was just I don't know if it was anybody we saw in the series. It looked like they were wearing the 501st standard trooper armor, and I mean, we know where Rex at this time is, I think, on another system with a few of the other ARC troopers. So, and I'd hate to see Rex like that.
But I'm thinking, I honestly thought that it could possibly be Rex because, I mean, you've got a time from now until you hit Rebels when Rex comes back. It could be Rex, and, after the events that end at the end of Clone Wars and getting the chip out of his head, but almost killing Ahsoka and all that, and everything else he's seen and his loyalty he had there. I mean, you saw the loyalty they had in the final episodes of Clone Wars.
Yeah.
So that maybe he's in the same state as Obi-Wan, broken, and here I am, I have a dime.
It could be very true. Yeah.
Well, I think Marwan, we might got to get rolling here, but this has been awesome.
We are at the end. What are predictions for episode 3? What happens?
I just want to see Obi-Wan ignite his lightsaber, and then I'll be happy.
All right, Rob.
I got nowhere I can go with this because this is all new territory. I'm ready to watch the next episode, which is Wednesday night.
Oh, 2 days. All right, I love it.
Okay.
Well, look, we've got 4 episodes left. I expect to see a lightsaber battle in the next 4 episodes. Each episode, I want to see one at least.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
I'll take it.
All right. Hey, man, this has been a great review. We had 2 episodes because they released the first 2. So we will be back the same time next Monday night at 8 p.m. So we hope to see you there. And, man, we appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you, Matt and Doug. Good to meet you, Doug. And Rob, as usual. And we'll get into it a little bit more. And FYI, Mace's specialization was the 7th form. Juyo or Vapid. I don't know how you pronounce that. So,
nice.
Okay. Reference
so
check.
he was
Nice.
the only known practitioner of the form and didn't fall to the dark side. And I guess that's how it falls for really aggressive, unpredictable approaches. So, just their little info there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh gosh.
All right. So with that, we'll leave it there. That was the review for episode 1 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And we will see you next Monday at 8 p.m. All right, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, Marwan.